This is EIA, Explorations in Awareness. Each week we bring you thought leaders, transformational change coaches, and spiritual teachers, all committed to helping spread the word of the inside-out nature of life. The fact that life flows through us rather than happens to us. And the knowledge that we are not human beings with occasional spiritual experiences, but rather spiritual beings having a human experience. Welcome to today's episode. You're in for a real treat today. I know I say that often, but I'm just really excited about the folks that this podcast has given me the opportunity to interview and work with and have really meaningful conversations with, and today's no exception. Joining us today is Kerstin Andlaw. She is a corporate consultant. She works with the inside out understanding of the way that life works. She works with individuals as well, and has got quite a fascinating story to tell us. So Kerstin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Really glad to have you. We had a good conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you were kind enough to share your journey, and it's fascinating. And I think the folks that are listening to this podcast would really enjoy hearing the journey that you've taken to get to where you are today. Would you mind spending just a couple of minutes to share that with us?
Yeah, very, very happy to. So my journey started. I started in the health and wellness industry. Initially, I studied sports, and from there, I moved on to. I moved to the UK, and I studied dance, contemporary dance, and there were two things that happened with that. I loved to dance, and I loved the performance and the creativity and all of that. The first thing that that happened sort of after graduating, I wanted to become an apprentice of a very well-known dance company in the UK, and I auditioned, and I did really well in my audition, and I got right down to the last three people, and I was very confident. I knew my capabilities and all of that. So the choreographer couldn't quite decide who to go for between the three of us. And so he decided to ask us to join rehearsals for a week with his company, which was incredibly exciting for all of us. Well, for me, it was anyway, just to be in the studio with them, rehearsing with them, taking class with them, etc. The thing that happened was the moment I stepped into that studio, I was unable to do what I knew I could do. It was almost like my body shut down and I wasn't able to function. Simple routines that I would be able to pick up with my eyes closed, so to speak, I wasn't able to pick up or remember, or even coordinate my steps. So I struggled through that week, and each day it got progressively worse, because I became more and more anxious about what's happening to me and why can't I do what I know I can do.
Right.
Needless to say, I obviously didn't get the apprenticeship. I still went on to dance and to perform, but it left quite an imprint on me. There was something there that I was really puzzled about, and I knew that there was more to it than just a bad day at the office, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I worked as a dancer for some time. I did some teaching, and what struck me after a while was that most of my peers would get a real buzz out of the performance bit. You know, after the performance, they were on a real high. They enjoyed it. It was all about getting onto the stage.
Yeah.
And for me, it was kind of the opposite. I sort of, got to the end of the performance, and I was kind of feeling, well, can we just get back into the studio now, into the, just dancing and being creative and that feeling, and it not being about the audience out there. It just being about what we do. And that led me to take a break from dance as a career. And I decided to teach yoga. I had obviously done a lot of yoga through my training, etc. I did some yoga teacher training, and I taught yoga classes across London. I had a little scooter. I went around from class to class, from studio to studio, from client to client, which was fantastic. I loved it. And that was a real start for me to kind of go, okay, there is something beyond the physical aspect. There's something in there, because I always knew the reason I was dancing, the reason I enjoyed movement, was because there was a feeling I got. And it started me on the journey of trying to, look into, well, what is that? Where's that coming from? From there, I then got into mindfulness, and I studied mindfulness at Bangor University. And again, it was sort of almost like stages and steps, where each step was kind of giving me a little bit more insight, allowed me to go a little bit deeper into the spiritual nature of our experience. I then had another profound experience where, and I can't remember whether we spoke about this in our first conversation, but I went through a couple of ectopic pregnancies. I've got 3 children, 3 healthy children, but I went through 2 ectopic pregnancies, and each of them really, I really struggled with. I struggled with the loss. I struggled with, wanting that child. That there was a lot of guilt, various things, and especially the second time it happened, I really, really struggled. But somehow in my mind, I thought, well, that's okay, because I know what to do. I'll just do some mindfulness and I'll be fine, right? I can meditate my way out of this.
Yeah.
Which I totally attempted. And, I had a practice for years of waking up at 5:30 in the morning and doing my 45-minute sitting practice. And so I just carried on doing that. And when that didn't work, I upped it to an hour, and I added another 20 minutes in the evening. And the more I did, the more I meditated, it almost was like I fell into a deeper hole. And it was a sense of, how do I ever get out of this? Like this, that sense of, I know this is supposed to help me, but I feel worse and worse, because I'm sitting here still with my thoughts that are going over and over what has happened, that are going over and over this loss, going over that I don't want it this way, that it wasn't meant to be this way, that this wasn't the plan, etc., etc. And I fell into a deeper hole.
So instead of like transcending your mind through the meditation and being in consciousness, you were finding yourself more and more in mind, and just, it was almost like that. Sounds like it was like that was becoming your mantra.
Yes.
Yeah.
It when previously, I obviously had times when I would meditate and my mind was very busy and very active, it always settled down. There was always that sense of accessing that innate well-being. Whereas this time that just did not happen. It was just a wall I was hitting, and there was no, it just wasn't crumbling, that wall. That was a pretty solid wall. So I got pretty desperate, and so I came across the principles through another coach. And I remember my first conversation with her, and it almost was Well, it was a real light bulb moment, an aha moment of, that is it. This is the link. This is the bit I have been missing. The bit about my thinking and
Right.
that personal world that I am in. This is
Right.
the bit that I've been missing. And I knew I had stumbled across something that was going to be, quite profound. And that's how my journey started in the principles. Yeah.
So instead of now, you were kind of realizing that all of this meditation was in fact just reinforcing this wall that you were trying to break through, and you had a little bit of a clear understanding of the way that things actually work.
Yeah. I mean, the fact, it was almost like previous to that, I I didn't know how it was working. I just knew that meditation and mindfulness was meant to work.
Yeah.
If I just sit there quietly and if I just let my thoughts pass, then eventually it will calm down. And it always worked, except for that time when it didn't work for a long time. Um, but I didn't know about the very fact that what we think we feel, I guess I kind of knew about it, but I didn't really know. I
Right.
kind of intellectually know, yeah, what you're thinking, you're feeling. But whilst I was sitting there in my practice, I didn't recognize that, my thinking was just made up and was just a story. To me, it was real. It was personal. It was who I was, and it was
Right.
everything. And I didn't see that difference. And even though that seems like such a tiny detail, it made all the difference to me.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure because of the fact that you were doing the mindful practice that you were convinced was going to work and help you transcend this moment, and the fact that it was in reality having the exact opposite effect, because as you were thinking about it more and more and living in the feeling of your thinking in that moment and having more concentrated periods of that thinking, that it was both on one level much more profound for you, but on another level it's the same thing that everybody goes through, because lots of people have, and it's not necessarily an ectopic pregnancy, but it's whatever it is for them that they're getting stuck in, that it's that tendency to just continue to obsess about it and say, I've got to be able to solve this problem. So then you have this conversation with your coach. You get the understanding, as we call it, of the inside out nature of reality, and that we're living in the feeling of our thinking in the moment. What happened then? What was the result of that insight, and what happened to that wall that had been getting reinforced? And
Well, what happened was, first of all, I stopped meditating. Like my years and years of practicing every day religiously, I stopped from one day to the next. And that was quite profound, because up until that point in my mind, it was, if I don't do my practice, I'm going to have a bad day. I'm not going to be okay. I need my practice in order to be okay. So it was very outside in. It was the practice that was making me okay. It was the
right.
practice that was holding me together. And that shifted overnight. And I just didn't. And it wasn't even a conscious decision of, well, I don't need to do that anymore. I just woke up in the morning and I got up and I went about my day, and I didn't end up sitting on that cushion. And it took a bit of time for me to realize what had happened, for me to realize that actually what has shifted is the knowing that I'm okay. knowing that despite, this ectopic pregnancy, despite it not going how I had planned my life, that I'm okay. And that if I would have another 5 of those, I would still be okay. That was a profound shift for me.
Yeah. It sounds like a little shift when you're explaining it to somebody who hasn't had that shift, but when you make that shift and then all of a sudden everything's the same, but it just looks and feels and appears completely different, doesn't it?
Yes. And that's the beautiful thing about it. I think it just happens. And I find with myself, and also often with my clients, it quite often takes a bit of time for you to catch on to that shift that has just happened.
Right.
Because it occurs, and because it's something falling away, it's almost like you don't notice straight away. It's often other people that notice the shift or that comment on something, and you go, oh God, yeah, I used to do that all the time and now I don't. Or I used to worry about this all the time, now I don't. It's like I had a client today, and she said to me, I spoke to my mom the other day, and I said to her, Mom, I've spent half my life overthinking everything. It's amazing not to have to worry about things so much. And her mom turned around and said, I told you all your life you were overthinking things. I know you stopped. I don't know how and why, because I've been telling you forever. But it's so little, or it seems so small and insignificant. But the freedom it creates within us is
enormous. Yeah. I have a client that I'm working with right now who has had that shift. And when I'm speaking with her, I'll often just say, just out of curiosity, can you feel the difference in our conversation inside of you? Because a month ago we were having a similar conversation to what we're having right now, but she was filled with angst and filled with anger. And the problem is still there that she's working through. But now she's just coming at it from such a calmer place. And this particular client is a little unusual because her mom is paying for the coaching for her. And so I'm kind of in conversation with the mom. I'm not really, I'm obviously not violating any confidences or anything, but I had a conversation with her, and her mom said, I don't know what you're doing, but the difference between the conversations that I'm having with her from a month ago are dramatic. And she doesn't seem to feel the shift. And I said, I know, we're both noticing this dramatic shift in her. She hasn't yet quite felt it on the inside yet, but as you said, it's oftentimes so obvious to other people, just in the way that we're making our way through the world.
Yes. Yeah.
So I have a question. Have you taken up meditation again, or is that just something that you said that was useful for the time and I don't need it anymore? Or
I still meditate at times. I still have a yoga practice because I like it. I enjoy it. And I do meditate sometimes. There is no schedule to it. There's no rigidity. I do it when I feel like it. Sometimes it's because I want to move my body, and it's around, physical health. Other times it's about just having that desire for some peace and quiet with 3 children running around in the house. There often is that. And sometimes it's a very informal thing where I just, sit on my desk in between clients and I just have 5 minutes and it just sort of naturally occurs. But it's always driven by, it just comes up like an idea in my head of, oh, that's what I feel like doing right now. And I very much enjoy it. So there is no connection to, oh, this is why I'm doing it.
Right.
And this is the outcome I'm looking for. It's just doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, that's the very reason that I asked that, because I meditate. I've been meditating for 31 years, and I'll often have things pop up to me during meditation. And another coach that I talk with as a colleague, and we kind of co-coach each other, sometimes I'll say, something popped up for me in meditation, and he'll say, you don't need to meditate. You don't need the technique, which I get, and I agree, and I kind of look at it the same way that you do. I'm not doing it as a thing, and I finally said to him a couple of weeks ago, and I think this is maybe the last time it'll come up. I said to him, I know I don't need to do it, and I don't need to eat steak either, but I like it.
Absolutely.
And it's just like you said earlier that, it was this practice, and it was a thing, and that my day wasn't going to go well. And, it's kind of the difference that, and you said it so elegantly, it's not something that I have to do anymore. It's just something that I enjoy to do occasionally, and it comes up. So. Yeah.
And it makes total sense when I do. And I do have clients at times asking for that, because especially if they know that I trained in mindfulness, they'll often say, oh, well, do you have maybe a breathing practice or, a mindfulness meditation you could give me that I can use for X, for anxiety or whatever. And I do on occasion offer it to them, but it always comes with a bit of a disclaimer, so to speak, of, well, you can use this, but this is not going to fix anything. This is not a technique that is going to result in whatever it is you're wanting it for. If you're in a stressful situation and it occurs to you to take a deep breath, by all means, take a deep breath, because if that's what makes sense to you, it's probably a good idea.
Right.
If you're in a stressful situation and you get all worked up, and then afterwards you think, oh man, I should have handled this better. I should have taken a deep breath, like Kerstin said. It wouldn't have done anything anyway, because it's not come, from within. It's just an external thing that doesn't fix it. It's not about, it's not about your surroundings, your so to speak, your state of mind. There is a lot we speak about our state of mind, but ultimately, yes, I agree, we can probably do things very well if we're in a clear state of mind. But equally, if we're not in a clear state of mind, that doesn't mean that we can't do things very well.
Right.
Again, that's sort of that misconception I find a lot of, well, I need to feel a certain way in order to do something.
Right.
And I think the whole meditation and mindfulness is sort of, feeding it is probably the wrong word, but sort of, pointing in that same direction of, well, if you want to have a clear mind, you're going to have to calm yourself down, and you're going to have to do some breathing, etc., which, well, you don't.
Right.
If you understand how it works, it will become clearer.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people that show up and do things when they're not necessarily in a super high quality of mind, but they just realize, I don't feel like doing this. I don't really want to do this, but this is what I need to be doing right now. And it's okay to do it when I'm not feeling that great, and I'll feel great later.
Absolutely. And this is actually something, probably one of the one of the biggest things I've learned that has helped my practice as a coach is to show up regardless and to do whatever it is I need to do regardless of how I'm feeling right now. So whether I'm feeling petrified of doing a talk, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to do the talk regardless of that.
Yeah.
Or if putting yourself out there, etc., etc. It's stepping over that. Whereas I had also spent years sort of always managing my state of mind and going, well, I can't do that right now. Or before I would see, before I would do a mindfulness session, a group session, I would do a bit of meditation and get myself into the right state of mind, etc., etc. Which, you can do, there's nothing wrong with that. But I felt I needed to do that in order to deliver what I needed to deliver. And that is just not true.
Right.
Well, for me, it's not true.
I think it's probably not true for anybody, but coming to that realization is something that's, it's nice and just allows you to kind of perform. I mean, if you're a coach and you're talking to people all day, every day, there's odds are good. There's going to be some days that you're
Yeah.
I'm not really in the mood right now, but oftentimes, I don't know if you've had the experience that I'll start doing something that I don't really feel like doing. And it's not at all unusual that once I start doing it, everything's fine. And I've learned that I do a lot of speaking, and it's normal for me to have butterflies and, my stomach churning before time, beforehand. And I long ago learned that, that was just the normal, and it was going to disappear once I started in the rhythm and got going and giving my presentation, regardless of whether it was planned or unplanned. Just the mere fact that I'm there and present, those butterflies just kind of eventually take care of themselves and flutter off wherever it is they flutter to when they're not hanging around in my stomach.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of my first engagements with a corporate company, international company, and I had a meeting with the CEO and the senior HR manager to talk around, implementing a well-being program for them. And I remember saying to my husband, I don't know how I'm going to do this, because I have never had a job in a corporate world. I've actually never been employed ever in my entire life. I've always worked freelance and for myself. And I kept saying to him, I don't know how to speak to these people because they are corporate people. And I also remember getting some coaching from Ankush and Amir around this, because, those were, they were, the people I was going to talk to were different people. They were people in suits. They were professionals.
Right.
And I wasn't. And I had this whole picture, this whole story about who they were and who I was. And so I was really, really, really nervous. But I obviously still went, and we had this conversation. And as you say, within the first few minutes, the butterflies went, and we had a fantastic conversation. And they basically turned around and said, yeah, this sounds great. We want to do this. And I walked out of there thinking, oh my God, this is just not even possible, that you can go from being absolutely petrified, thinking I can't even speak to these people, to actually engaging with them and having a really grounded conversation. I thought I had to be something, but actually just being present, being myself, sharing what I know,
All right,
was more than enough for them to see, well, this makes sense. Let's do this, And I think it works like that for everything.
yeah. And then there may have been a moment where you're like, okay, I sold this. Now, what am I going to deliver?
Oh yeah, that was the moment on the way home. I was like, oh crap, now I'm going to have to do this. Okay, now I'm scared.
Thought I was scared before. Now I'm really scared. Well, I'm curious to know when you go into corporations and present yourself as a mindfulness coach and present yourself as working in I'm presuming a less stress environment, or rather actually than presuming, tell me a little bit about the conversation that you have with them. How do you position yourself, and what is the general response to that? Because I know folks that do what we do, where we're often worried that there's a woo-woo line that if we go over it, we may get in trouble. What's your experience been having those conversations?
So it's funny you mentioned the woo-woo line. In my head, there is a woo-woo line too. And so initially, I speak very little about, the spiritual aspect. I speak very little around wisdom and all of those things. And the work I do is around stress, anxiety, well-being, and optimizing people's performance whilst actually creating a better experience. The way I position it is because I sort of grappled with this for a while, because there's a lot of coaching out there, a lot of stress management out there. And I sort of kept thinking, well, what's different here without me having to go into mind, consciousness and thought? Because I mean, that's a whole other tin I'm going to have to open. And
Right.
Sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a 10-minute conversation I get initially. And that's not enough to go into that. So I talk around what I do being something that is optimizing their people's skills and capabilities. So I'm not teaching them more skills. I'm not giving them more knowledge. What we're creating is insight, is looking at their state of mind, so that by creating a shift there, their attitudes and behaviors, and therefore performance, well-being, is affected automatically. So it's sort of, we're going right back to the source rather than tackling the behavior around stress. We're going all the way back to, well, how are we perceiving things? What's our perspective, etc. And then I usually, later on, when I do a seminar, when I work one-on-one, that's when I go further into, the principles, into, our spiritual experience of life, the spiritual nature of life. And that seems to, so far, touch wood, seems to work well. And people seem to be receptive to it, because I guess there has been some time to build a rapport, to build trust. So perhaps that allows it to not be perceived as woo-woo anymore then.
Yeah. And it's obviously something that is very needed in corporate America today, because they're getting, I remember when I worked at a corporation, I worked at Bank of America, we were going through rounds and rounds of layoffs. And after a round was announced and there, 7,000 people in the company would have lost their jobs, you'd call all of your friends and say, are you okay? Are you still here? And there became a shift in people where it was like, yeah, I'm still here. And it wasn't like, yay, I'm still here. I'm still part of the team. Because as they kept, trimming the so-called fat, it was like, yeah, we used to have 7 people in our department doing a job. Now we've got 2, and I'm one of those 2, and the workload hasn't gone down. Mm-hmm. So, to be honest with you, I had a lot of folks that, and I started to feel this way as well. I'd have been happy to take the package, to get the 1-year severance package of a salary and go figure out what was next. And, corporations are getting so lean that being able to, what you said, or at least what I heard, was you're not teaching them new techniques. You're not teaching them skills. They've already got that.
Yeah.
They know how to do their job well. You're not going to come in and teach them the Kerstin system of 10 things that you need to know. You're going to teach them how to access the resources and the resiliency and the creativity and everything else that's just, built into our system, put in there by the manufacturer.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And what I'm finding is that there have been times where I've been really surprised. Just recently, I've been hired by a law firm to work with some of their senior lawyers around stress. And what happened, we were going to start with 3 lawyers. And we were just going to do 8 sessions for each lawyer and see how that goes. And before I even started working with them, we had some of the senior partners signing up. We even had the CEO and the owner of the company sign up. And to me, that was before even starting to work with them. To me, that was a real sign of this is so needed. And the reason, and this is obviously an assumption of mine because we're just starting this work, but one of the reasons I think is because I wasn't promising them another 7-step strategy of managing stress, because they've done that. They've done that 100 times and it hasn't done anything. What I was, what we're offering as 3 principles practitioners is to work with where they're at, to work with their circumstances, to work with their experience and help them create a shift in how they perceive things. So that already puts them at ease, because it means they're not going to be told to, well, actually, you just need to clock off at 5 o'clock and take a break, because they can't and they're not going to. They feel at ease because they know this is not about my history, my background, my childhood. This is not going to, take me apart and try and put me back together, or this is not going to try and fix me. This is just helping me access, as you so beautifully said, what's already there. Help me see something that I'm not seeing right now. And that's kind of exciting, I think. More exciting than I'm going to come in and I'm going to, wave my magic wand and I'm going to fix you up. Because I can't and no one can.
Right. And as you said, they've already tried that dozens probably of times. And I think, you coming with a very fresh approach, talking to them about getting access to resources that they've already got and getting fresh thinking coming in is it's a very different approach. And, I love our colleague Jamie Smart has the phrase of subtractive psychology, and he talks about the work that we do being fiercely reductive.
Yes.
Getting things out of the way and seeing them disappear. So tell me about the initial conversation that you've got with a corporation. And the reason that I ask this, I work with corporates as well, and I initially my conversations I feel are a little bait and switchy, because I come to them as an organizational development coach that has a mindfulness approach, and I'm going to teach them to clear things out of the way. I talk about that same type of stuff, but I am wrapping it in corporate speak and organizational development, which I'm fluent in. So I'm curious how you get the conversation going with somebody who's got no exposure to the principles and no exposure to the inside out understanding, sees that there's a problem, obviously, or they wouldn't be having the conversation. How does that go?
Well, it's different each time.
Of course.
A lot of it is, so the initial conversation is always very much around, well, what does your world look like? What is it that you're experiencing it, and what would you like to be different? Because I can't just assume that if someone has a lot of stress that they don't want to experience that stress.
Right.
Because it really has to, I think it has to be spelled out of, well, what is it that you would want to get out of this? And most of the time it is around stress or anxiety and not wanting to feel that way. And then we often have conversations around very high level around their perspective on things, how they're seeing it in that moment. And initially it's just a conversation around whether they see a possibility that they could see things differently without trying to create a shift or a change in that moment. It's more around, well, can you see that there is another way? Can you see that, sometimes you open up your inbox and it's got 500 emails and it's completely stressing you out and you're freaked out and you'll feel the pressure and your body's getting tense and all of that. And another day you open up your inbox and it's got 500 emails and yeah, it's a bit irritating, but you're just cracking on and you're getting through them one by one and, you're in a flow. What's that all about? It's not your inbox.
Right.
That's creating the feeling.
Right.
It's how you're perceiving it. So we start with little things like that and to introduce it and to just open up the possibility that, look, this is the direction we're looking in. We're not looking at managing your inbox or managing your environment or, teaching you how to calm down, because, you can go online and Google it and you'll find it. If you want to have, 5 steps to calm yourself down, just Google it. You don't need me for that, and I often say that to them. It's really about, looking at, how are you perceiving things? And do you think it is possible for you to perceive it differently? And then we have a conversation.
Yeah, that's really the biggest difference. I guess it's not really the only difference, but it's really the biggest difference, because all of the information is out there.
Yeah.
I did a study of the New York Times books about a year ago, and of the top 100 books, 81 of the top 100 books were either how to do something, these are my 7 excellent steps to get everything that you want in life, or they were stories about people who had climbed to the top of the mountain and here's how I did it, or some secret sauce for eat nothing but artichokes and you're going to have a slim, wonderful waistline. And they were all very additive, very technique oriented, take you plus my secret sauce and my 10-step system and we'll create you 2.0, and it's going to be way, way better. And I think it seems like there's an awakening that people are realizing that if that was the answer, we would have figured that out already. Kind of Michael Neal's TED Talk, we got all of this information out there. Why aren't we awesomer?
Yes. Yeah. Although it still strikes me how obviously, people know it's not working, all the strategies, but the amount of times I still get asked, so So what's the technique?
Right, right.
What's the strategy? What do I do? Because it's so ingrained that we've got to do something. The idea that, you know, that misunderstanding can just fall away and we can actually remove it and reveal what's already there to you without them having to do a lot of things
Right.
is difficult for, in my experience, difficult for a lot of people to understand or to get comfortable with. I think that's probably more get comfortable with, because they feel like, well, I should be doing something, shouldn't I? Shouldn't I do something? You know? And so I often say it's a bit like, you know, you already have everything you need. You just don't know it. And it's like you saying to me that you're thirsty in your own house, and I go to your kitchen tap and fill the glass with water. And then you realize that, oh yeah, I have glasses and I have water in my tap, and all I have to do is open the tap. I'm not supplying the water to you. I'm not supplying anything to you. I'm just showing you what you already have.
Right. Yeah, and that's it's a very experiential journey. And you know, to me, it's the hypnosis of social conditioning that we've been trained to believe that we need to intellectually understand something. And you know, the toughest journey is getting the 14-inch journey from the head to the heart, where it's not an intellectual understanding anymore. It's something that we're truly embodying and we can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. What do you notice with the companies that you work with? What are, in whatever the process is that you're taking them through in the conversations and the coaching, what do you notice are the results that they're able to achieve? And is there any commonality to when the different executives start to get it and start to see it, how that happens?
So generally I see a lot more ease for them and within their work and within their personal lives, because it even though this is about work, it sort of has an effect on everything around them. And the interesting thing is that it's not exclusive to companies that I work with on the more senior levels. I've also worked with companies on the more junior level, and the senior level hasn't got involved. And there seems to be, and I don't know the number, but once there has been a number of people that have seen something different, that sort of have deepened their understanding, it creates a little bit of a ripple throughout the company. Mm-hmm. Where everyday things change. You know, it may be there's less bickering. It may be that there is just generally more support between people and supporting each other within their work, within whatever they're going through. The way people show up changes, which affects how other people show up. So even though not everyone was involved in the coaching or in the work, there seems to be a ripple effect once it gets to a certain number, and that number seems to be different for each company. And the same thing happens on the senior level. I've seen that happen, where it then sort of trickles down because they approach certain issues in a different way, because they have that ability to have their skills, their professional experience, their competencies, but they also have that little bit extra of understanding how it works and understanding how it works for all of us. Therefore, being a more understanding person, having more empathy, being more gentle. And that's not in a wishy-washy kind of way of, oh yeah, well, it doesn't matter, just turn up whenever you want. But it's there's still a firmness with that, but it's a kindness and a firmness. And I liken it to service, where it's more about, well, what is the best for us, for this situation, rather than what's right. What is what we've always done. That becomes secondary, and it becomes more about, well, let's look at this.
Right.
There's more presence, much more presence.
Yeah. And the connection is, it seems to me to be so much deeper, regardless of whether it's a supervisor to somebody that's reporting to them or colleagues working back and forth with one another. You know, I saw a thing in, it's probably on Facebook, you know, it said some version of, in the history of cheering up, nobody has ever cheered up from being told to cheer up, you know. as a strategy that in the history of mankind, that's never worked. And one of the things that I've noticed as well in the corporates is, if you have a manager who has a little bit more clarity and can have a higher quality of mind, and then therefore can access more of his or her innate compassion and inherent empathy with somebody else, and somebody comes and, you know, if you come and you have to tell your boss that it's late, you know, whatever, I'm not going to make the deadline, you know, they're coming in with such angst and anxiety and everything. And if you can actually just have a conversation, one person talking from clarity, the other person has a tendency to just kind of have all of their anxiety, not necessarily melt away, but at least decline enough that there's a space in there to open up, to have a more meaningful connection and a better conversation and a stronger collaboration between two people who can say, all right, we've still got a job to do. We're still down here in the foxhole. And, you know, we still got these goals that we've got to hit, but let's strategize about how we can do it and, you know, move forward with a lot less mental static, making it difficult to actually communicate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always find when we're very present, we don't need to work on connection. It just happens.
I like that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we do innately connect. Say that again. I've never heard that put exactly that way.
I can't remember. I don't know if I can say it exactly that way again. I'll give it a try. But what I was saying is, when we're present with someone, we automatically connect. It's kind of, well, it happens. We don't have to do the connecting.
Yeah. It just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just saw. I like that a lot, and I'm so glad that we're recording this, because now we've got two versions of you saying it so elegantly, and I like both. I was just going someplace online, and one of those ads popped up that somebody is selling a like his 7-step rapport formula to, you know, be able to earn trust more rapidly and something else more quickly, and you know, taking you know, another technique to do something that's just naturally occurring anyway when we're in the right space. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, in a lot of corporations, at least in the US, the number one reason that corporations lose their key employees, their talented people that they want to stay in contact with, it's not the money, it's not the job, it's not the perks. Very often, more than 50% of the time in the surveys that they've done here, it's that they don't have a connection with their people that they report to, and they don't feel the company is invested in their success.
Mm. I think that is really key, and that's what a lot of companies are waking up to, that it's people, it's working with people. And Joe Blogg, what's important to him might be completely different what's important to Bob, and what's important to Janet, and what's important to Susie. And it's actually for everyone in the company, but especially the senior people, if they have a true interest in their people and show up, that connection automatically happens and people can feel it. And I don't think you can fake it. I don't think you can go, well, as long as I speak to each of my employees once a week, then, I'll make them feel that, they're important to me. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. You can speak an hour to them every week, but if you're not truly showing up for them, it means nothing. And for me, I think that is the problem in my mind. This is my personal view, with a lot of the strategies and techniques that are out there, because inherently there's nothing wrong with them, because they exist because they worked for someone.
That's
and
right.
to someone, they made sense, and it probably was some innate wisdom that told them they should do that, and so it worked. But once we make them into steps, into things that we need to do in order to get X, they're not true anymore, because we've stopped being present. We've stopped tuning in to what makes sense to us, to what is present in that moment. And I think that's what people want. That's what I want. Is I just want people to be real with me. I don't want to show. I don't want, your best side. I just want you to be real, because I'm going to be real with you. What you see is what you get.
Yeah. The authentic you.
Which is different every day. Yeah, I really like that. I think I read that from Steve Chandler. His what he was saying was, authenticity is coming from the word author, and therefore it's you being the author of your life and of everything you do. And I love that, because it so fits with the principles, in my mind anyway, of, well, we get to choose. I can be a cake lover one day and a crisp lover the next day, and I can be shy one moment and I can be extrovert another moment. There are no rules. I don't have to stick to any label or any box, because there are none.
Right.
So I get to be and show up however it makes sense in that moment. That, to me, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is. It takes the, the maze that we often feel like we need to walk through in order to get someplace away. And it's like stepping into the field of all possibilities. It's, every moment. The truth of the matter is, everything in the future is unknown to us. And if you can embrace that and be present and show up however you show up in that moment, it's It is. It's very different and very freeing. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kerstin, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your journey and your wisdom. It's been a really lovely conversation, and I'm quite certain that there's a lot of people who would like to continue a conversation with you about the work that you're doing and the things that you're seeing. And if somebody wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
The best way would be via email. So that would be Kerstin, that's Kerstin, at auxilium-ctc.com. Or you can find me on Facebook under my name, Kerstin Andlaw. So yeah, and I'm very happy to have a conversation with anyone about this sort of stuff. So yeah, I love hearing other people's ideas. I loved our conversation. There's always new stuff to learn, and that's what it's all about, really. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the generosity of your time, and I'll put the contact information in the show notes, so anybody that wants to get a hold of you can just click away and
Fantastic.
get you in short order.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope we talk again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.